All right, we're back for episode 121 of Digital Divination.
Yes, we are. Yes, we. Oh, wait. Um, we are a bunch of luminaries. Mirror Ron Lundeen, have to mention that I'm an employee of Wizards of the Coast, and the opinions I express here are mine and not theirs.
Excellent. I was just going to leave that pause there. All right. So, well, seeing as that we are now, calling from the future, happy Halloween, you guys.
Yes.
Happy
Happy Halloween to you.
Halloween!
So anyway, given the fact that this episode comes out on Halloween, I thought we could talk a little bit about spooky stuff in Starfinder.
Good.
Yes, let's do.
Let's spook it up.
So I'll begin a little bit. No spoilers on this, but as of just a couple days ago, our final episode of Intrepid Scoundrels was posted, and at the end of that, we kind of talk a little bit about going into the Starfinder Second Edition playtest, Cosmic Birthday, which starts out kind of spooky.
Yeah, so don't want to spoil much, but it has a little bit of a horror element at the beginning. At least a little atmospheric horror element at the beginning.
Yes. And
Uh,
go ahead, Ron.
No, I think that a lot of the horror element leans into some of the things that I really like about the horror components of Starfinder.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
By now, people listening are like, "Ooh, we're ready for session one of Cosmic Birthday with Intrepid Heroes." But we've been playing it for a little while, and I've been kind of really digging it.
Oh, good. Glad to hear that.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I was thinking we could talk a little bit about, and we've done this actually both. I think Jason and I talked about this last Halloween a little
We
bit.
might have, yeah.
And Ron and I have talked about this in the past as well, but I don't think we have all talked about it together. So that makes this new.
Oh,
Yes.
that's nice. One thing that I've been paying a lot of attention to, um, here in the year of the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, I think back on like the origins of just a role playing game, sort of as a hobby, and what they are and where they've led to, including things like Starfinder. But like the very origins of role playing are rooted in not just sort of fantasy literature, but also horror and a lot of things. So horror has kind of been with us all along,
Mm-hmm.
all the way
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of the big space genre themes are around horror. I'm thinking like, Alien, right? And Aliens and that whole franchise there. The Thing, that's I saw
Mhm.
I saw a little ad for it on. It's coming back to some streaming service again. I'm thinking
Yeah.
with all the other stuff that's coming out, for Halloween. So
For Halloween. I don't know if I mentioned this to either of you. I certainly don't think I mentioned on this show. Just a couple weeks ago, my wife had never seen Alien or Alien any of the Alien movies, and so we sat down and we watched Alien, the first movie, and it's been decades probably since I've seen
yeah,
it, and it really holds up. It's really
Yeah.
good.
yeah,
It's very good. It's a very good haunted house movie that
Yeah,
happens
it's
to be
haunted
set
house
in
in
space.
space.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, some of the costumes are a little bit silly, especially sort of seeing what they then do in Aliens and some of the
Mm-hmm.
subsequent show. But it doesn't. I mean, but it doesn't make it any less sort of like weirdly creepy. A a stalker in your haunted house is just as scary,
Yeah.
whether their costume is good or bad. Like the fact that they're there is the scary thing at all.
They're an intruder, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. If we're talking about movies real quick, this came out this year pretty recently, and it is science fiction themed. So it's the latest installment of the VHS series. It's called VHS Beyond. VHS is a anthology series of found footage movies, and a lot of them are directed by a lot of different directors, a lot of different writers. This one is more science fiction based, so there's some alien stuff and creepy horror in that sense. And it actually has a segment that's written um, a- a- by Justin Long and his brother, I think, and then
Hmm.
a section that's written by Mike Flanagan of Haunted
Ooh.
on Hill House and directed by his wife Katie Siegel. And she stars in it too. So that one's pretty. That one kind of wraps it up, and it's very good and very interesting. But there is nothing scarier than the depths of space, right? It's so unknown, right? You've got the
Mm.
unknown. This is why things get scary. We don't know what's out there. We don't know. We can't possibly know. We can't survive out there. It's like the depths of the sea and the and the depths of space are the two most scariest places that humans can conceive of because they are so unknown.
Unknown and inimical, right?
Yeah,
There's like the fundamental requirements to survive in either of those
Right.
places are such that even the threatened absence of any of the many minor things you might need to stay alive,
yeah,
it can propel a lot of really good narratives, right?
yeah,
Not
yeah, yeah, yeah,
not enough air, not enough water, not enough food, not enough thrust, not enough, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Any
Not
of
enough
that
heat. Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
ripe for, oh my goodness, we're gonna die in space out here.
Yeah, you're going to die, and all there's like nothing you can do about it. You can't
Right.
like a stalker, a slasher film. You can run away from the slasher, and you might get away. You might get to the cops, and they might save the day or whatever. You start running out of air. You're in the depths of space, and your space capsule starts cracking and letting out all the atmosphere. Sorry, I mean, pretty much you're gone, I mean, Apollo 13, Apollo 11 stuff,
Yeah.
what have you. Sometimes there might be something going on, but otherwise you are
Mhm.
pretty much dead.
But what's interesting then is in Starfinder, we almost take it for granted that we have this armor,
Hmm.
heavy,
Yeah,
light, medium, that has integrated environmental systems to protect against that.
that's true.
So, so does that eliminate, that aspect of the fear that you would have in space because it's like no big deal for everyone?
Well, yeah, it certainly
Yeah,
does when you're trying to tell sort of a space opera type of
yeah,
story, right?
Yeah,
Where that kind of thing doesn't much matter. But when you need the narrative to have it matter, at least in Starfinder First Edition, there were a number of rules that would circumvent or override the environmental protections, and that was kind of a, oh, things are about to get real kind of moment.
sure, yeah.
hmm
So you
hmm
can, and early levels, all of that stuff still is timed, right? You have a limit on how much you have. So
right.
if you are, first level and you have an hour's worth of protections or whatever it is, and you happen to be 65 minutes away from safety and stranded on an asteroid or something, that's where you're going to get that tension.
Mhm.
hmm Yeah, it kind of reminds me. I think it was book 3 of Dead Sons when you're in Castroville and you have all that
Two.
extreme. Is that book 2?
Book
Okay,
two,
book
yeah.
2.
That's book
Kind
two.
of the extreme hazardous weather there, and we're
Hmm.
and our party at least had to really manage the environmental protections because you're so low level and you would lose you'd use up all the energy, right? You have to.
Yeah.
There's no way to charge it out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, that's right. We were
Mm,
swapping batteries back and forth to try to extend it, right? The
Yeah,
same way that like people caught scuba
right.
diving have to share air.
Mm. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's
Yeah.
cool.
But other than that, I haven't really. I can't think of any campaigns where that came into it. Now in the Dawn of Flame adventure path, Ron, you ran a really kind of spooky uh, book for us.
Yeah, and the thing that I wanted to keep there is that one of the other things that you just sort of always have at the ready, you don't need to worry about is light
Right,
sources,
right.
Yeah.
right? So I wanted to make light or the absence thereof to be the scary thing, right? So again, that's dealing with some special rules in order to make that a part of the ramping up the tension
hmm hmm
Yeah.
in a horror type story.
It's a sort of a interesting loop that you can get into in a game with that has like a power curve, like Pathfinder and Starfinder. You start off at low level, and maybe you're kind of like, oh, well, you got to make sure, if we're not all dwarves or whatever, to be able to see in the dark when we go somewhere that doesn't have natural light. So you have your lights and your torches and whatnot, and then you kind of get comfortable with that. Everyone's got a light or this a magic light, and then you get it to a certain level where then creatures are now like, well, now I cast darkness that's extra magical that extinguishes flames and puts out magical light, and then you're like, oh no, we have to deal with this darkness again, and then you go up a little more level, and then you can defeat that, and then I think there might even be like an extra level. Like, oh, this is greater darkness now, and you can be fully even those even magical light that beat the magical darkness before is now weak against this. So you get this sort of seesaw effect, just an arms race, if you will, about trying to keep the sort of keep it interesting, keep light and darkness kind of interesting to the party.
And I like that about Pathfinder Second Edition. And I'm glad that's kind of being brought into the Starfinder Second Edition playtest some, where you have low light vision in some creatures, but dark vision isn't. I don't think it doesn't seem to be as prevalent as what we saw in Starfinder First Edition.
I think like one of you has it, and that's it. Maybe two of you.
So so light really matters, and that's interesting. That's in a lot of games will track some fairly mundane things, and then once you get to a certain sort of point or level on the escalating power curve, you just kind of don't care about them anymore, right? Encumbrance is how much weight am I carrying sometimes can be a thing, and then after a while it's just sort of hand wavy, no, we're not worrying about it. Or like nutrition, right? Food, water, whatever. Like, oh, as soon as we can, magically create that or get something technologically created, we don't need or enough space in a null space chamber. Right? After at some point we just don't care. Light is one of those things where you do keep caring, sort of as you say, the seesaw to go back and forth. And it may be in Pathfinder Second Edition and therefore Starfinder Second Edition. It may be because a lot of those effects rely on the ability to counteract the opposing effect, and that's always a host of its rules with rolls and how that's going to work. And so, at some point, you can get escalating light or darkness that go against each other. You don't get something like escalating hunger that's counteracting something, or escalating weight that makes a counteract check against something.
Sure, yeah.
But light and darkness, I mean, they're kind of a classic elements of horror, right? Spooky stuff around Halloween is, what's in the darkness, what hides in the darkness, what can come get you in.
Yeah, just the unknown. So like, for example, today in a game I was playing, we were attacking some boss and he was calling some creature, and all we heard was this big heavy movement outside, and it's like, wow, we're all down really bad. We got to hurry up and hide, shut this door and hide, because we can't handle this big unknown thing that's going bump in the night, out there.
That's great.
Right. Even not knowing what it was the scarier part.
Right.
And then later being able to interrogate somebody and find out what it was, there was kind of it's just so it's like a wolf. No, it's a big and scary one. Oh, well, okay, it's like a dire wolf, right? No, we know what dire wolf.
Yeah, but before that, it's like I have no idea. It could be some big monstrosity. I'm thinking like abomination vaults, like those things at the bottom of the wells. That was really freaky.
Oh yeah, because they were unknown, right?
Yeah.
It was just the terrible noises that you could hear at the top of the well.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that like any kind of like role playing game that has the sort of similar to Pathfinder, Starfinders, you have an ability to kind of know things. Right? It's not like Call of Cthulhu where you can never know the eldritch horrors that lurk, beyond the stars. Or if you try, you go insane, right? But you can you can be like, oh, I can fight this thing, maybe, right? If once you do fight it, it becomes a kind of a known quantity. So there's a trick as a GM to kind of keep things. If you were doing a horror style game, if you're doing your standard space fantasy, high fantasy stuff, that's also that can be fine. That makes the characters feel like heroes, right? But if you're doing a more horror themed, you want to keep that sort of unknowableness to things, and you gotta be maybe like really like say really strict on like you don't know anything until you recall knowledge about it, or ask around about it outside of a combat. You don't describe things too much, or describe certain things that are more scary than other parts of a monster, whatever. Or like you said there, John, like you don't see it right away; you can only hear it, right? And that gets the imagination going and gets the sort of like, oh, that we don't know, so we better be scared of it because it could be anything.
Right. One of the tricks that I have for that
Hmm.
is if I can shade into GM advice here, is you just cover over the difference with an NPC, right? Because if you're trying to describe to the characters, oh, there's this monstrous sort of humanoid shaped shambling thing that's like 8 feet tall and it looks like it has 4 arms or whatever, they're like, well, we want to make checks, we want to know what it is, and then they get mad if like their check doesn't work. They're like, but I rolled really well and I deserve to know because of my check. But if somebody reports to them,
Hmm.
oh, it was huge, way taller than anything I've seen, and it had, gosh, 4 arms, maybe six, right? No, the players are going to make a check on that
Right.
Hmm.
because they're
Yeah.
locked behind the information they've been
Mm.
given by perhaps an unreliable NPC or a very scared NPC, right?
Mhm.
And so that adds some of the tension because they can't just look at their character sheet and point to skill and say, I'm going to roll this and that way means I know it. All they can do is try to get maybe better information out of somebody who doesn't have it, and then they've got to go off into the unknown with with only partial knowledge. That's one of the things that can make that really scary is if you take some experience about something scary and put it not directly into play confronting the PCs just yet, but put it in having confronted an NPC that they get to talk to.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a classic trope, right, for horror films where early on with the monster, you only see what the monster's done, right?
Hmm.
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 You don't get a direct glimpse of it, for a long time, and your imagination is just building up what could have done this thing, what could have, eaten away, with acid this whole area, or slash this
Right.
person like
Bulkhead,
that,
or
or
yeah.
it's just like it's like unstoppable. What are we going to do about it? How can we, and it's hard for player characters to, because you build out for all these contingencies. Oh, I got to make sure I got a ghost touch weapon here because I know there could be some incorporeal things in there, or I'll have some sort of magic that will work against undead really well and things like that.
Hmm.
But if they don't know what the thing is, and even if they see it, if they don't know what it can do, it's just so strange, and it just does these unexpected things. I'd like that, and that's what I'm really enjoying about Starfinder, the second edition playtest, is we don't know a lot of the things, right? We think we
Yeah.
might know
Right.
things, but we don't know, and you're like my imagination is thinking, wow, this is like some crazy variant of something we've seen in Starfinder. It's gonna be wild,
Yeah. 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 And we all just got scared thinking about things
We all
that
got
we don't know about. We got the
Yes.
chills. We're all just here, frozen in terror. Um, I sort of, I forgot what I was going to say. Um, when you talk about like what you don't know what it does and
Right.
what it can do, kind of stuff, and that is, yeah, it's true. You don't know how it's going to like function in the Starfinder Second Edition sort of framework or whatever. But that also made me think a little bit about the thing, like you mentioned earlier, John. Is that like that's monster like they see it, but it's kind of different every single time,
Right.
and they
Right.
don't know what it can do. And that's kind of might be another fun way to sort of like spice things up if you're going for that kind of a horror. Is like, oh, you have a monster and it comes at you maybe, and it does some specific thing, grabs you and bites you, and then it like disappears, goes away. And then when you see it again,
Oh.
it can do something different, right? That it has not yet done. And you can just kind of pile on some like new abilities, or if you want to like do this sort of like quick and dirty way, use a different stat block for a monster that is about the same level, but you
Yeah.
call it the same thing. It
Yeah.
looks this way, and then you just say, "Oh no, now it has a weird claw that when it cuts you, it's poison or whatever." And you're like, "Oh, they didn't do that before," and then it runs away and goes away and does something. Comes back. It's a third monster, but it's all technically the one monster.
Hmm.
It would
Right,
be
right.
a
And
fun way
and
to do
some
it.
of the changes you might get between the two lead into the story, right?
Yeah,
It's like, well, I'm going to go ahead
right.
and attack it. I got armor. I got AC 19, right? AC 19 hit it last time. No, it doesn't hit it this time. It looks
Yeah.
like it's sort of grown some sort of thicker carapace since you saw it last. What?
Yeah,
It gets tougher.
Hmm.
yeah,
Its
yeah.
AC goes up.
Yeah. It's not something that I never thought of before doing, but now I'm like, oh, maybe could do something with that.
I had a my really good friend Mike has been GMing me in a lot of things for a lot of years. He's great. He has what we, his players, will sometimes derisively call kind of the flexostat system, where he doesn't really decide
Hmm.
what a number is needed, what a number is until it's actually needed at the table, and then he'll decide based on like what makes the most either narrative sense or creates the most tension at the time,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So, you know, oh well, I'm gonna, I'm gonna do a bunch of fire damage. Does it seem to take fire damage? Oh, it takes some. Some. How much? Right? Does this mean we don't use fire anymore? What? It's like, well, it takes. You can. It's dark, right? You can tell that it takes some, but wait. Okay, let's try something else.
Hmm.
Is this is one of yours exclusively run like horror type games, or is this just always like
A
any
lot
kind
of
of
the
like
stuff that he does ends up shading into horror type stuff anyway. It's what
Sure,
he, it's
yeah.
what it's. He's. I mean, there's no type of narrative that I've uh seen from him that isn't good, but
Hmm.
horror is among his best, and
Hmm.
he likes to lean into that. Um, it's a little bit of a it's a little bit of a problem for him that one of the games that he runs for us a lot is the new Torg Eternity, which has as one of its fundamental rules that numbers are never secret. Right?
Oh, hmm.
You always know what all the numbers are for every creature, right? Because that
Okay.
players need that information to know how they're going to utilize their resources and how they're going to
Hmm.
spend their their cards or their rerolls or whatever. Um, and so that's been a little tough on the flexostat model.
Hmm.
That's funny. That's funny. It's the sort of thing that like when I'm thinking about like running games that are would be horror based and I get to pick like a system, the more flexible of a thing that I can have as a GM that I can sort of twist on the fly is always just sort of the better for making things up. Like, playing through Scum and Villainy, Blades in the Dark. There's not like NPCs don't have hit points or anything like that. It's just kind of there's the narrative of what the dice is saying, what y'all are trying to do, and what a lot of times I think is narratively more fun. Oh yeah, you might knock this one down, but then I'll say like, oh well, there's three other guys that come around the corner, right? Because I can do that. I don't have to have that all laid out ahead of time. Or just like, oh, you get a partial success. That means it's you get him, but he gets you back, kind of stuff. And it's like, oh, maybe this type of attack, maybe change tax or whatever can really make things a little more, and that's sort of good for any kind of tension. It doesn't have to be for horror,
Right.
really. But it's can be pretty effective with horror and everything getting a
Mhm.
little extra spooky.
Well, speaking of tension, right? So that's what a lot of the things that drive horror is, the unknown or darkness or things like that. In a space game or a futuristic game, one of the things that sometimes I see it in Starfinder, it happens in another game that Ron and I are actually in, Mutant Year Zero, is radiation,
Mm.
right? So
Mhm.
that there's this constant fear of radiation, getting radiation poisoning. Now, this is something that you can alleviate some with armor, but at least in Starfinder First Edition, I actually don't know for the Second Edition playtest. Like really high levels of radiation can still be problematic. You know,
Mhm.
even when you have higher levels of armor, the higher levels just helps you, with your saves on something like that. And poisoning, especially radiation poisoning, can be very deadly. And it's just, if you're in an area of high radiation, that's just something that's just going to be there, nonstop.
True. Yeah.
When it hits a lot of markers for horror too, because
Hmm.
it is a thing that is very deadly, ultimately fatal, completely invisible,
Right.
and often undetectable.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. I guess trying to think of something that has that as a sort of present. I didn't watch that Chernobyl TV series, but I imagine that's got to be
That
something
is
that's sort of
phenomenal.
something
We
that's sort of
watched Chernobyl. It is amazing. Like
nice.
I watched it within the past month.
Oh,
Oh,
And a lot of people had been recommending that.
well, shoot.
cool.
Maybe I need to go watch that.
Yeah, as far as the progression of sort of what can happen,
Hmm.
um, and it's not. I mean, there's also moments. Even a lot of horror movies, right, have moments of bravery, right,
Hmm.
where people have been affected by. They know that a place has this invisible danger of radiation, but they need to help people, or they need to solve something, or they need to stop something. So they'll go and do it anyway, right? And that makes for moments of real heroism.
Mhm.
A lot of even horror stories have people who are like, well, I'll be the distraction, right? Or somebody's
Yeah.
going to be the bait, and you're like, oh, I don't know if they're even going to make it out, right? That's very brave of them. Uh, so that's a tool that you can definitely use.
Mhm. I was
It
thinking.
can be.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it can be tough to do the noble sacrifice,
Mhm.
like 100%, like death sacrifice in a Starfinder or Pathfinder kind of game. But you can like be the one that sort of takes the big hits, so uses your major resources to try to get something done in the face of terrible horror. Maybe pushing through like, oh, you've got frightened 3 condition, and now I'm gonna try it anyway because this is my guy's a big darn hero and he's going to stand up to this monster kind of stuff. But yeah, that can be kind of a good sort of like, I mean, that's a good kind of cap like on a horror kind of tale too, like getting to that point
Mhm.
in a session or a campaign or whatever, where you can kind of stand against the horror.
Mhm. Mhm.
Makes players feel really good for sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was kind of thinking kind of along those lines of, how it gets incorporated because like a lot of, just the aberrations or the, really gross undead or whatever, it gets to be really abstracted out when we're looking at Starfinder, right? Because you're encountering all kinds of creatures from all over the place, and some of them are really gross, some of them are, undead, some are whatever. Um, it's kind of hard to. They don't seem any scarier than just another big bad monster. Um, maybe that'll change, but I'm thinking back to like one of the things at low level in Pathfinder that scared me was I think it's ghouls, the ones that
Mm,
paralyze you.
hmm
That's goals.
Yeah, it's like
Classically, unless you're an elf,
yeah,
apparently.
and it's
Yeah.
like so when you're going to fight this undead, it wasn't the fear of the gross undead; it was the fear. Oh, I could get paralyzed in while I'm sitting here trying to fight, and then I can't. Then I'm just like
Can't
you
do
know,
anything.
oh
I've lost control of my
yeah.
character, and who knows what's going to happen to
Hmm.
me sort of physically after that. You've got a really good point. And when you mentioned, I didn't mention this when you brought up the thing before, but one of the things that has one of the aspects of Starfinder that require sort of maybe a little more work to go into horror is that something that works for Pathfinder or even for modern day, the thing, oh, here's this shape-shifting alien and it's the monster for the spoilers. Anyway, there's a shape-shifting alien and it's the monster. And you're playing Starfinder, you're like, oh, shape-shifting alien. Yeah, my friend, that's what my friend's got as a PC,
Right,
right?
right,
That's
right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
He just doesn't
Um,
turn into those gross things, though.
yeah, just
Yeah,
horrible viscera and claws and
yeah.
tentacles and insect legs everywhere.
Yeah, there was. I did some work a couple years back now on a project called Grimmer Space,
Mm.
which was actually a lot of different types of horror in one sort of overall horror sci-fi setting. And a lot of the types of horror that you might expect to see in a lot of different ways can work very, very well in sci-fi. We've talked about sort of the isolation and fear of abandonment, right? When you're in deep space or on like an alien uncharted world or something like that. Body horror is one of those things.
Hmm
Mhm,
Replication to replace people is one of the. I mean, there's
hmm
a lot of different aspects of horror that actually work really well in sci-fi.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, it's something I was also tried to do with Signal of Screams a little bit to kind of maybe semi spoil some stuff from Adventure Path that's ancient. But it's like it's a little bit of like horror of something happening, you don't know what's going on, and horror of your personal loss of control. There's a little bit in there where I try to go into like the horror of drudgery, essentially like being sort of a corporate drone kind of thing. And then it gets into the full on like, oh, horror of like weird, gross body horror, where like, oh, this asteroid is and actually a giant heart, just in space, and it's wrapped in chains, and the whole Cenobite kind of stuff that
Mhm,
we get
Mhm.
with Velstrax. Um, so yeah, it was something that sort of like little tidbit tastes of those different types of things. Um, but I'm trying to think if there's any other good subgenres of horror for sci-fi. Hmm. Hmm. I mean, we've hit on a lot,
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
think, at
well,
this
a lot
point.
of the things that are otherwise not strictly a horror genre can have a lot of horror elements to it.
Yeah, exactly.
The like I said, the Horizons of the Vast that we played had a look. Something here happened a century ago, and it's really bad, and
Right.
it's coming back, and we don't know enough what it is, and there's nobody here to help us.
Yeah.
Or the horror of war, right? The alien, the very alien aspect of the swarm
Mm.
Mhm.
sort of AP coming over, right? And the horrors of war in that is something that you can really amp up with
Sure.
some of the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
features
An
there.
unstoppable,
Right. Right.
infinite force, essentially, right? You know.
Mhm. And a lot of that adventure path in particular has involves sort of psychic mindscapes, right? So
Mhm.
you're not safe in your own head even necessarily.
There you go. Yeah,
So
yeah.
Mhm.
That's one too.
Yeah.
Well, that's all horror, all the way down,
Yes.
I
right.
guess.
All right. So I want to switch gears here for a little bit now. What is
Mhm.
uh what is your all's favorite space themed Halloween costume?
Space themed Halloween costume.
Yeah.
I don't remember if I wore this on Halloween, but for some reason, I had a rubber face hugger.
Oh. Oh.
Wait, you had
Um, yes,
what?
it was the one you could buy. It came with like a really cheaply made Nostromo gray T-shirt kind of thing,
Okay.
but it was just a thing you could strap on your face, and you maybe actually had a little. You actually had a little breathing tube, and you could puff up the sort of cheeks of the face hugger a little bit while you were walking around. But I
Aw,
don't think
cute.
I wore that at Halloween. I just had it at one point.
You just wore it was daily wear
It
is
was
what
yeah, it was just casual wear for me.
I don't know, for all the, gosh, thinking back, I've done an awful lot of, costumes over my years. I'm a big fan of Halloween. I don't know that I've got a specific space one, except when I was really young, those, the cheap plastic face covers, and then the, like, sort of poncho that was decorated like so I probably had a Luke Skywalker at
Mm.
one point,
Yeah.
uh, with one of those uh, with one of those types of costumes. But I don't know. I can't think of anything more specifically than that. I'm sure if I went through some old Halloween pictures, I would be slapping my forehead and going, "How could I possibly have forgotten about?" But
Yeah,
right now, I
yeah.
can't remember.
What about you,
Yeah.
John?
Well, probably the favorite one I've worn, space one, was actually during COVID. So when I teach classes on Halloween, I like to try to dress up.
Hmm.
And so during COVID, Halloween fell on one of my teaching days, and I was teaching remote though, right? So it's like, oh, okay. So what I did is I actually have a Luke Skywalker helmet, which used to be on my shelf. Now it's up above. I don't think it's on my shelf there. And I have kind of the orange jumpsuit, and I actually have a vest, but it's more it's Poe's vest. It's not Luke's vest, right? That I was wearing with
Hmm.
it. But anyway, so I was teaching remote. So what I got is a background which is inside an X-wing that was
Oh,
behind me while I was
Yeah.
teaching, and so I got a screenshot of it. Now the thing is, I don't look anything like Luke Skywalker. When I posted that up on Facebook, everybody is pointing out that I look a lot like Gold Five, right? Stay on target, not the kind of guy who's saying it,
oh,
Oh, okay.
because
the
he's
guy
a
who
little,
explodes.
yeah. So it's like, so I guess that's that I like that. When I dress that in person, I don't think it looks as cool as having the background.
Sure. Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's my favorite. And I still like this Halloween. I was going to dress up. I was really trying hard to get my Mando costume together, but I still don't. It's in the closet.
Mm.
Um, So I decided instead I'll give all my students off Halloween. I'll stay at home
Oh,
and
Oh, that's pretty
wait,
kind of
trick.
you.
very good.
Well, that's one reason why I suggested we not have our game on Halloween.
Our regular
Yeah, because
Thursday
I
night
wasn't going to
game
be in
because you
Seattle
wouldn't you
anyway,
wouldn't be
so
around anyway.
that's why I'll just
Um,
kind of stay home.
I understand. Aren't haven't they said something about a Mandalorian movie, right?
Yes,
So next
yes,
next Halloween is still going to be very
yes.
appropriate
I just
for a
gotta
Mando
I gotta
costume.
work on it. Well, part of it is the Halloween. The costume I have has like real like sturdy Beskar plates and stuff, but they're all tied with straps on it, and I want to replace all that with heavy duty Velcro so it stays on, and so I can dress myself rather than somebody else having to put it all on me and take it.
You're not just going to use a squire to dress you in
I
your
don't,
armor like the old days.
because then I can actually wear it, if I want to wear it to a convention or other things like that. But yeah, I'm really pushing for next Halloween now.
Next Halloween
to get that. So
sci-fi costumes, I think, are just inherently more difficult to do than being a cowboy, being a pirate, being an old-timey hobo, right? You just kind of those clothes kind of exist, you know what I mean? Whereas sci-fi stuff doesn't. I mean, unless you go out and get yourself a Star Trek, Star Wars type thing.
Well, being a Jedi with the robes isn't as hard.
That's actually pretty. Well, that all the robes easy, maybe the thing, but you gotta have a lightsaber.
I know
at that
that's
point,
right? And the
that's
lightsaber has
tricky
to have
part.
a specific look to it.
Yeah.
This touches on something that we brought up here that I've talked about many times, which is how fantasy RPGs are a little bit easier for a lot of people to enter into because a lot of them lean on tropes, right? I mean, and you also mentioned the cowboy and the hobo and stuff. They're leaning on tropes. Sci-fi almost never leans on tropes. There's specific stories, specific characters. I mean, even if it's a specific look of a Jedi, not any particular person, but a Jedi has to have something lightsabery looking, right? If you're going to be somebody in any kind of uniform, well, that uniform has a look, right? There's not a general starfighter pilot trope kind of outfit you can do. It's got to be from a specific intellectual property, and that makes the costuming a little more difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So you could be a Jawa just with the big hood over and stuff. I think.
And they get something with the lights deep inside or something like
flashlights.
that. Let's get to that.
I'm way too tall for a Jawa. I'd have to be something more Wookiee. So. I could be a Wookiee.
Yeah, that would be fun, actually. All right. Well, I hope you all have a good Halloween. Whatever you do, do you have plans?
I have teens now. I've got 3 of them, and they've got plans. So my plan is to make sure I drive them to where they need to be, because none of their plans have yet involved, how am I going to get to such and such party, or from such and such party to so and so's house where we're going to do some trick or treating or whatever. All those plans kind of default to, well, Dad will probably take us. So my plan is to be on call to be the dad's going to take them.
That's good. Jason?
I actually have a book club that evening. Not for long. It's gonna be maybe like an hour, because the book we're talking about is frankly not super great. But
I thought you were gonna say it's really short.
it was
spooky, right? Is it a spooky book since you're meeting on Halloween?
Set during Halloween, but I wouldn't call it spooky. It was a murder mystery as well, but it wasn't spooky. So there's a whole series of books by this one woman who puts bird puns in like 90% of the titles that she writes. The books are not necessarily about birds. The birds show up. This one, the name and the cover image it happens. There's nothing to do with the mystery. Anyway, it's a very weird series of books. I've only read one of them so far. Everyone else has read a couple more. Like there's a couple Christmas ones as well. But so we're doing that, and then hopefully setting out, and the trick or treaters come. Although they might come before the book club, depending on if trick or treaters come. And I'm probably get dressed up for that, because this will be the first year in a long time that I've actually wanted to see trick or treaters knocking on the door.
Yeah, I don't know. So where we live now is kind of like a retirement area. I was telling my wife.
Oh no!
I bought one of those big old massive bags at Costco of candy. Because
that's going to be your candy by the time on November 1st.
It'll be my students' candy, because I'll bring it to give away to them, and they're always excited about that. But yeah, I'm thinking, I'm really kind of curious, because at our old house in Bothell, we get between 70 and over 100 kids, in there, and we'd have to worry about, do we have enough candy to go all the way through? Here it's like, those few kids that come through, they're getting massive handfuls, and
handfuls of candy.
Yeah.
We at the best of times we don't get hardly any trick or treaters where I am, and over the past several months we've had a lot of construction out in front of our. We're going to get even fewer this year, if any. So I think we haven't even bought any candy. Maybe I ought to think about that.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
No, I'm thinking otherwise. I've got a fair number of stacks of Magic Gathering boosters that I've managed to get from work. I think that's what I'm going to give out.
Boy,
for
people
Halloween
are going to
before
get
my
that. Word's
door.
going to come out. Yeah.
I mean, unless it's like, like little kids will be like, "What? I can't eat this.
This isn't
Quick
sugar."
little tweet," I said.
Yeah. But their parents will be excited about it, right?
I hope so. Anyway, maybe that's the best. If we get anybody at all, maybe that's what I'll do.
All right. Sounds great. Well, happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to all.
I'm John.
And I'm Ron.
And I'm Jason. And this has been Digital Divination.